This is the Media Police Post, broadcasting from the Fort Hall School of Government. In this show, we police the state of truth in the Republic. And because truth is communicated to us by journalists and analysts, we have made it our civic duty to put it to the test. We advance from two confirmed truths about the media. One, and according to Roger Stone, the media is either lazy or evil, and for the most part, it is both evil and lazy. That is why the truth, their truth, must be put to a test.
And two, that journalism is verified gossip. In fact, what is presented to us as news analysis is gossip that has been verified by journalists. This gossip has to be ground-truthed. We will assess the state of truth in what they submit to the Republic, and we will pass verdict on what is true and what is not. Now, for the record, we are not journalists. We are thinkers. We are not lazy or evil, and we do not verify gossip. What we give you is the truth that sets you free.
On today's show, we will discuss ideas that reflect unformed and uninformed opinions, and ideas that made you stupid. Narratives that fell into the cognitive trap of we see things as we are, not as they are. Narratives based on conjecture history, and those that smack of envelope journalism. Welcome, Ms. K and AX.
Thank you. So this week I'd like to talk about a column by Barack Muluka titled The Fall of BBI, Uhuru and Raila Must Ask Hard Questions, published in the Standard last week. The column pretentiously began as a commentary on constitutional interpretation and the judicial legacy of our courts. It, however, degenerated into a clumsy critique of the unnamed lawyers and scholars that advised the president on BBI. It had no deep insight or analysis. It was written because it had to be written, not because it was telling us anything new. In his singular focus on the death of reggae and identifying who is to blame for its demise, Mr. Muluka mistook the forest for the trees. He was so involved in the personalities around the president and the advice they did or did not give that he could not take a step back and look at the situation as a whole. He did not recognize that the Supreme Court decision was about both process and product. The process of initiating a referendum and the product, the changes to the Constitution. The Supreme Court had no problem with the product. Any change to the Constitution is allowable, even changes in the executive from a 2-person Ferrari presidency to a 5-person pro-box presidency. Contrary to the claims made by the Linda Katiba team, no provision in our Constitution is unamendable. There are no eternal clauses, and the basic structure doctrine does not apply in Kenya. The Supreme Court did have a problem with the process of initiating this referendum. But on this, I will quote the American judge, teacher, and jurist Jerome Frank, who says that the law is not clear, exact, and certain, but instead is now and will continue to be largely vague and variable. What does this mean? It means that the law is complex, and lawyers and courts will sometimes have to deal with difficult questions that will not have objectively correct answers. Those difficult questions like, does the basic structure doctrine apply to Kenya? And can the president initiate a referendum? These questions can only be determined by judicial interpretation. The question is taken to court, and a bench made up of an uneven number of judges is set up to determine the question by majority decision. The law accommodates the fact that sometimes we cannot agree on a particular issue, and we will take that decision of the majority. Majority decisions are an acknowledgement that there are no right or wrong answers. It is a fail-safe mechanism for what to do when all the judges can't agree. So what Mr. Muluka did not tell us was that BBI was only one proposal out of many more proposals to amend the Constitution that will happen in the future. He also did not tell us that the Constitution will be amended one day, which it will.
All right, so in 1812, French emperor and military legend Napoleon Bonaparte raised a massive army to attack Russia. Some 600,000 troops were sent to fight a force of 200,000 cold-hardened, poorly trained, and probably drunk Russians led by Tsar Alexander I. Impossibly outnumbered, Tsar Alexander knew that he could not fight Napoleon on an open field, and so he chose not to. As Russian forces withdrew from the advancing French army, they burned everything to the ground. They burned fields of wheat, set homes and churches ablaze, and torched the forests around them. Eventually, the Russians would burn Moscow, their capital, to the ground as well, all in an attempt to leave nothing of value for Napoleon and his troops. So Alexander reasoned that if Napoleon is to be king, he shall be king of the ashes. This is called the scorched earth tactic, or the Samsonian option. And it is one Russia would repeat in World War I and II, and most recently in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. But scorched earth tactics are not a Russian speciality. In fact, I believe that they are being deployed in our 2022 elections. And this belief has led me to ask a question. Is William Ruto deploying these scorched earth tactics in our politics? Has he decided that if he cannot be the king, then whoever wins in August will be king of the ashes? Let us examine the evidence. Ruto is outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned. With the resources of the state marshaled against him and the tyranny of numbers not in his favor, Ruto knows that, like Tsar Alexander, his goose is cooked. And while he might not be able to win, he will ensure that whoever does will be king of the ashes. This might explain why he has allowed both his rhetoric and that of his team to escalate in violence in recent months. In 2022 alone, Arap Ruto has first called for the border to rise up against his own government when he incited border riders to storm police stations and violently repossess their motorbikes. And two, he sat and smiled as a member of his team deployed the inflammatory Madoadoa remark, harkening back to the days of 2007. And third, he said nothing after his sycophants went after Mamangina repeatedly, despite his repeated calls for decorum in our politics. And this year is only a quarter of the way through. The effect of such words, statements, and sentiments is to strike a match that could eventually see country burnt to the ground. Remember, this is how 2007 started, and with the exact same players and with the exact same words. In 2007, Ruto himself incited his supporters to violence. Should he lose the 2007 elections, it is on record at The Hague. And now it seems he is creating the conditions for a blazing inferno. This is clear from his most recent opposition to BBI. First, this opposition was never in earnest. If it had been, he would have affixed his name to a list of parties involved in the court process. But he didn't. And second, he opposed BBI and the solutions it proposed to the fundamental problem of our politics, which are the feelings of ethnic majoritarianism and the historic marginalization as a result of a Ferrari presidency, with a room for only a president and a deputy president. The solutions proposed within BBI were necessary to stop the cyclical violence that characterizes our elections. But instead of supporting it, Ruto has signaled that through his opposition that he prefers the status quo. He prefers death, destruction, and violence every 5 years, or put differently, a scorched earth. And I believe that we have only seen the beginning. But before I finish, a random thought. Is it possible that Ruto's opposition to BBI was merely a thought experiment? We know that the last time Kenya had a constitutional referendum before an election in 2005, the referendum became a tester for who might win the 2007 election. Therefore, is it possible that knowing that the Hustler Nation is a very difficult voting bloc to account for, Ruto opposed BBI to force a vote that would demonstrate the support he could marshal? Just a thought.
Professor Mutahi Ngunyi often says that politics is about who gets what, when, and how. Today, we would also like to consider instant gratification versus delayed gratification in the context of public policy priorities. Instant gratification refers to the tendency to opt for immediate pleasure now instead of a better return or benefit in future. In terms of public policy, the tension is between a government making decisions to satisfy the electorate in the short term versus making decisions that will result in more benefits for country in the long term. But let us park that thought briefly and begin by traveling back in time, a time when the children of Israel were being liberated from captivity in Egypt. When the Hebrew nation were liberated from Egypt, the fruits of this liberty were not enjoyed instantly. They had to travel a great journey for several years, but the goal was clear: the promised land. So in their journey, they were to hold steadfast to the promise that yonder in the horizon, there lay the land of milk and honey. Yet, being human, shortly after leaving captivity, when they came to the Red Sea, they complained to Moses, "Why have you brought us here to die?" And even after the miracle of crossing the sea, 3 days after that, they again started complaining and saying that they ate better food when they were in slavery. This would go on throughout their journey to the Promised Land. And we may also notice that the generation that left captivity is not the generation that eventually fully benefited from what was promised. This challenge replicates itself even today. The tension between the desire for immediate short-term benefits versus investing for better long-term returns. It is a problem which we see today in Kenya, and it also goes somewhere in explaining why the Gema nation has taken issue with President Uhuru Kenyatta, who, like Moses, is also a prince turned liberator. President Uhuru has been more focused not on the instant gratification of voters, but more on how the Kenyan nation and future generations can eat of the bounty of the Promised Land. Getting there through policy investments which are designed to keep bringing returns for many generations to come, accelerating the growth of our economy, expanding its size and therefore the opportunities within it, and undertaking an ambitious infrastructure agenda that has positioned Kenya in a place where it is ready for takeoff. From the ports along Kenya's coast to Lake Victoria, the Kenyan-made ships we are building both in Mombasa and in Kisumu, the road network, the rail network, and the Kipevu oil terminal. When the President Uhuru came into office and told us he wanted to close the infrastructure gap to make Kenya more competitive, this infrastructure gap was the Egypt we were being liberated from, and the Promised Land is a middle-income economy and eventually a first-world economy. Poverty of dignity is the Egypt we were being liberated from, with 5 million title deeds being issued in 8 years so that coming generations will not be unlawfully dispossessed of their just inheritance. And the present generation can leverage their titles to access credit, create wealth and employment. Poverty of dignity is also captivity in Egypt, and restoration of dignity is improved through healthcare, through better dialysis, hospital equipment, affordable maternity healthcare, and many more hospitals in the last 8 years, 24 in Nairobi alone, as we march towards the Promised Land of quality and affordable healthcare where our dignity is restored. Political instability is the Egypt we escaped through the handshake doctrine, which is taking us to the Promised Land of a peaceful, stable, and inclusive democracy. The fundamental problem for long-term decision making is that rewards will often come years and even decades after decisions are made, which means not all benefits will be enjoyed by the present generation. This is why Senator James Orengo said that it is in 20 to 30 years the people will realize what President Uhuru has done for this country, because policy investments take time and they fall within the realm of delayed gratification.
I want to tell this nation that part of the work that has been done in the last 4 years, including the expressway, including opening up the old railway line to Kisumu, to Nyanyuki. What is happening in the field of energy 20, 30 years later is when people realize what President Uhuru has done for this country.
Populist politicians, however, exploit people's need for instant gratification to win the popular vote. That is why this UDA and Kenya Kwanza fellows will sell you pesa mfukoni, pap, and they will tell you that you cannot eat roads. This is because they would rather eat the billions for building roads and then come and give you 50 bob every 5 years and then tell you that's pesa mfukoni and that you can't eat roads. Maybe instead of Kenya Kwanza, they should be called Pesa Kwanza. Thank you for joining us on the Media Police Post. Journalists, you've been put on notice. See you next Monday.